Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing fantastic. So, as I was watching this documentary about this pretty psychopathic person named David Heiss, I came to realize some of the wisdom of Islam concerning patience. And this individual, he was a loner who spent a lot of time on gaming forums over 8 hours a day. He didn't necessarily have real friends in his real life, and he became obsessed with a lady named Joanna who had a boyfriend named Matthew. This particular individual was a German national, and Joanna and her boyfriend Matthew lived in England. What's really sad about this story is that this girl's naivete on getting too close to a male led to her boyfriend getting murdered. She saw some warning signs about his stalker behavior and how he became obsessed with her, yet she continued speaking to him, and even when he flew over there and knocked on her door unannounced, he got her address like a crazy person. She opened the door and let him sleep on her floor while her and Matthew were in their bed, and she said that every time she'd open her eyes, he would be staring at her. Eventually they found him a hostel to stay in, and he kept messaging her and becoming psycho. Eventually, he flew back again after the boyfriend Matthew had posted in the gaming forum some insults aimed at him. The stalker, David, became obsessed, flew back, waited for Joanna to leave to go to work. The stalker, David West, knocks on the door. Matthew opens it and stabs him 86 times. Then takes some of his belongings that belong to Matthew and them, puts them in the trash, changes his shoes, wears Matthew's shoes, and then flies back to Germany like nothing happened. This individual was also rejected from the military after 2 weeks for not being mentally fit, and he seems to have had parent issues. He didn't take his parents' divorce very well, and didn't fit in with his mom's new husband and their new family that they created. And so he was quite a depressed person who spent most of his time online in gaming forums, didn't really know how to handle women, and didn't try to make connections in the real world, and was existing inside a digital matrix. And he became obsessed with Joanna and idolized her to the point where it drove him mad, and to where he thought he had to get rid of the boyfriend in order for them to be together, even though she didn't want to be with him, and made that clear. Now, this got me to thinking about patience, as I said, and about male rejection. How some young men need to learn how do you get rejected, how do you move on, and why the digital matrix is not very healthy for people, and how young men learning to control themselves and be patient with depression, with a broken heart, something like that, they need to work on it and pray, and that prayer keeps you busy, and going to the masjid or finding a healthy form of a community is better than a gaming forum, which is based around violence anyways, even though it's kind of pixel violence. Further, it got me to thinking about how the family unit is very important for the stability of the minds of young men. His mother going and getting a new husband clearly affected this young man's mind to the point where he really couldn't take being rejected. He was rejected by his new family, by the military, and by the woman he became obsessed with. And this is quite tragic because his masculinity was underdeveloped, his self-confidence underdeveloped, and his improper way of trying to find a significant other is quite manifest. You can't find someone who is already taken. And it also got me to thinking about how Islam sets up a lot of rules around male and female interactions, and how it's there to protect us as women. Further, Matthew should have had protective jealousy over his woman when she had told him that this guy keeps sending love messages, that he keeps stalking her. She should have recognized the red flags, and Matthew, when this guy, who's clearly obsessed with his woman, shows up to the door, you do not invite him in. You don't take pity and let someone manipulate you. You need to be able to identify a threat. And no man should let another man sleep in the same room as his woman. So the Islamic rules around interactions between men and women, and how a husband is supposed to be a protective guardian over his woman, could have, really saved this individual's life. Matthew ultimately paid with his life, and it's sad that you don't get to learn from a mistake, but others get to learn from your mistakes. What I also found interesting is that people sometimes answer the door when they don't have to. You have a peephole, you see who it is, if it's someone you don't want to talk to, or you feel iffy about it, don't answer the door. And if it is someone who's iffy, and you're going to risk answering the door, you have something in your pocket, something behind your back, or something strapped to your waist that can help you if things get out of hand, which Matthew didn't have. And what I also find quite sad is that David Heiss's mother didn't tell him, what it means to be a man. How do you find a wife? She didn't make sure her son was getting outside of the gaming room. She let her son rot away and neglected her duty as a mother. And David Heiss's father as well, not finding him a spouse, not being able to identify that amount of gaming is unhealthy. I try to work with my little brother. One of them, he plays Xbox all the time. My mom's a single mom. She's on welfare, has a bunch of cats, doesn't want to get a husband, and sleeps all day sometimes. And she's not proper, and when I try to tell her, my brother needs a role model, he needs to, get back into kickboxing again, she doesn't listen. She thinks she can be a man, and it's just not the case. Very unfit. Very unfit. But she has an emotional attachment to trying to be a good mom to at least one of her kids, after she has messed up with so many of her children, that it's hard for her to be reasonable and rational, because she clings her happiness onto my brother and coddles him and lets him do whatever he wants. And he has anger issues now. Sometimes he'll throw his controller, and he broke the TV once, and it's just too much gaming. It's just not healthy. But my mom doesn't want to really be the man and taking him to exercise, taking him to do activities. She sleeps and then just lets him play gaming all day, which is extremely unhealthy for his mind, body, and soul. And so when I was looking up this info and listening to the documentary on David Heiss, I realize how many young men, especially during the forced lockdowns, they're going to struggle with their interactions with people in general. One of the reasons why lockdowns are so dangerous is because they got people to go too much into the digital world, and that's why things like the metaverse and such are going to be really bad for humanity, because you're not able to pick up social cues. It's very different when you interact with a human being than a pixelated image and text on a screen. It changes the way in which you behave and the things you'll say. And I think we all can recognize that fact. And so, in order for us to prevent another situation where David Heiss copycats come about, I think it's very important for the Muslim community to start getting into the masculinity of the classical Sunnah, of the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, to talk about patience, and to really help young men to know that it's okay if you get rejected, and to also teach women that in the age of the male gaze, you don't want a simp army. You want to cover up and be as modest as possible, because you might get an obsessive person who stalks you like this David Heiss did to that Joanna lady. And she came home from work and discovered her dead boyfriend upon the floor, and it was a complete disaster, traumatization fully. And so, when you see women exposing themselves online in the most strange of ways, and thinking that it's always going to be safe, and then having people DM with those simps, it's quite scary. For example, like what Andrew Tate did when he was typing provocative sexual messages to other men for his female clients, by his own admissions. That makes a man more obsessed, especially when they invest a lot of money. So in Islam, it wouldn't be permissible for a man to send sexual messages to another man. Secondly, it wouldn't be permissible to have a prostitution ring. And it wouldn't be permissible to have private chats between a man or a woman. And marriage would be preferred. So Islam has a lot of solutions that are practical and make a lot of sense. But in the liberal age of the sexual revolution, hedonism, debauchery, and erosion of proper ethics and traditional values in the family unit, we are going to see more of these loners online who are afraid of women, who only watch women through OnlyFans and online and become obsessive weirdos, turning into monsters. And our duty as parents is to find spouses for our children, to help them, to vet them, and to always make sure we are communicating with our children about who are they talking to online, what's going on with your life, what's new, so that we can be aware of any threats against them. And for husbands to not allow men who like their woman in that way to ever enter into their home. Islam has a lot of wisdom in that liberal feminists call oppressive patriarchy, when rather it's a safety measure, as we have got to see in this David Heiss situation. It's really quite sad how this man who was in his 20s became so obsessed with a woman that he took someone's life because he wanted to be hers, even though she had rejected him. But the other angle as well is how women have to know how they're coming off. If you're being too friendly, you're going to have a problem. It's good to be stern. Now, as we know in Islam, we're told as women, you don't want to be vicious and vile and cruel to men, but you don't want to be too super soft, because they might have sin in their heart. You want to have the proper professional balance. And clearly, Joanna was lacking in that knowledge. So there's so much knowledge in Islam that prevents, well, at least helps mitigate situations like this that can occur in our digital age. So I hope that you can reflect, and if you know someone who's a gamer and they're just becoming really immature towards women, obsessive towards women, help them. And those men who are spending a lot of money on OnlyFans, pardon me, they can become obsessive as well. Because if this young man became obsessive just over a female giving him attention and creating a gaming forum together and whatnot, imagine how obsessed someone can become when they're paying you all this money per month to see your nudes, and then you're pretending to like them, and then they don't get the real thing, and they do everything they can to find you and stalk you and cause you harm. Sin begets sin. So we shouldn't be telling these young girls that their actions are consequenceless, that there's no risk, no danger. When in reality, if you join that community, there's a danger. Being a very sexy woman online is highly dangerous to stalkers. I mean, for you, because of stalkers, I mean. I don't think feminists want to accept this fact because they want to pretend that clothing doesn't have any issue and that the beautification of women for men they're not married to has no consequences, when in reality, men can become obsessed with women who are fully modest and stuff, but more so when they get addicted to seeing what the goodies are. So I hope we all can take some lessons from this story and help the young men to find friends, to find partners, to be a person who has a little bit more self-control, patience, and fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for any action they commit, and to show restraint. We have to make sure that women also understand as well how to report a stalker, how to know when to cut things off, to be very careful of what type of men they're speaking to and on what terms, and to never let a man into your home ever who's not your husband or your family member. Again, very sad story, but we did indeed learn from it. And through learning about these tough stories, we can learn to love our religion and the guidelines it sets out.